Uniform. Uniformity. Uniformly. The City Hall is kept at a uniform temperature. Uniformity nationwide, enforcing uniformity. The performances are uniformly excellent. Concise. Concisely. Conciseness. Concision. Keep your question direct and concise. You need to explain clearly and concisely. Conciseness is using the fewest words possible to clearly convey an idea. So, precision and concision are both your strength in writing. Procrastinate. Procrastination. The less you procrastinate, the less you will find yourself in a frantic hurry to complete tasks. Procrastination is a thief of time. Objective. Objectivity. Objectively. Objective criteria, objective observation, objective truth, objective report. All our objectives were gained. The judge had a reputation for complete objectivity. Objectively speaking, we're the first generation that could sustain life without food. Astute. Astutely. Astuteness. The detective's astute observations help solve the crime. Consider as his research so astutely demonstrates. She is admired for her political astuteness. Potentate. Jesus Christ will be the faithful and true potentate, the King of the earth. Cathartic. Catharsis. Screaming at the top of one's lung can be surprisingly cathartic. I can do this because after I wrote this poem, I had a complete sense of catharsis. Sustain. Will this shelf sustain the weight of all these books? The outer space not enough oxygen to sustain life. The court sustained his claim that the contract was illegal. Flippant. Flippancy. Flippantly. I thought it was such a flippant tone throughout. His flippancy makes it difficult to have a decent conversation with him. We pick a text and chat about it with some balance between insight and flippancy. Indifference. Indifferent. Indifferently. He treated my request with indifference. How can you be indifferent to the sufferings of starving people? The team played indifferently today. Invoke. Invocation. Priscilla went to a psychic to invoke the spirit of her dead mother. Please remain standing until after our invocation and national anthem. Genre. The novel and short story are different genres. Ebullient. Ebullience. Ebulliently. The ebullient crowd went crazy when John took the stage. I'm going to talk about happiness of ebullience and giggling and good cheer. She burst into the room with her usual ebullient, and immediately started talking to everyone. Palliate. Palliative. Palliation. Interventional radiology procedures to palliate the symptoms of the tumor. I took the cough syrup as a palliative to help me sleep through the night. We can also use radiation for palliation, so we can use it to make them feel better. Dominant. Dominance. The castle stands in a dominant position above the town. The absolute dominance of the governing party. Intricate. Intricacy. Intricately. The intricate puzzle took hours to complete. So there's some sort of intricacy there. I wanted to look at this intricately constructed book. Tenable. Tenability. The view that the Earth is flat is no longer tenable. We have our gas analysis equipment so we can understand the tenability of victims. Articulate. Articulately. Articulateness. Articulation. Tim's articulate speech made his crazy idea seem logical. Bones that articulate with others. I think it has been very articulately said on behalf of my colleagues here. Because he had both this passion and articulateness. As he drank more wine, his articulation became worse. Credible. Credibility. Credibly. Dave's story about aliens stealing his cell phone isn't exactly credible. The growing credibility gap that crippled his presidency. I am credibly informed that I will plan to pursue graduate school. Provocation. Provocative. Provocatively. Provoking. Provoke. He hit her after repeated provocations. A dress with a provocative slit at the side. A provocative comment, a provocative remark, a provocative speech. I am not easily provoked, but this behavior is intolerable. Provoke laughter, provoke riots, provoke violence. Jocular. Jocularity. Jocularly. I said in a rather jocular way. It's actually kind of a jocular relationship. Hal is always so jocular, it's strange when he's serious. Superfluous. Superfluously. Superfluity. That remark was superfluous. They were only interested in each other, so I felt rather superfluous. All of us suffer from a fear of superfluity. Tedious. Tediously. Tediousness. Mrs. Shu lectures were so tedious I would start to nod off halfway through. I'm going to be tediously honest. This can be a very slow, frustrating, tedious process. Copious. Copiously. June took copious notes in preparation for the test. It was produced copiously, but took a long time to decay. Penchant. You have a penchant for telling stories. A biologist with a penchant for insects. Consecration. Consecrate. The clergy performed a consecration ceremony after the church was built. Consecrate his life the service of God, to the relief of suffering. Enumerate. Enumeration. She enumerated the items we had to buy: sugar, tea, soap. Pay careful attention to this idea of enumeration of steps. Belittle. Belittlement. Belittling. Don't belittle yourself. The air was filled constantly with fighting, harsh words, negativity and much belittlement. I find it belittling to be criticized by someone so much younger than me. Indispensable. Air, food, and water are indispensable to life. A good dictionary is indispensable for learning a foreign language. A bat is indispensable when you're playing baseball. Officious. Officiousness. Polly's officious offer to help was just an attempt to get inside my apartment. His officiousness is not genuine. I suspected he has it on purpose. Reconcile. Reconciliation. Reconcilable. She refused to be reconciled with her brother. They can't reconcile their differences. Could you reconcile yourself to a lifetime of unemployment? The meeting brought about a reconciliation between former enemies. This is not easily reconcilable. I don't think they're reconcilable. Munificent. Munificence. Munificently. They welcome him with munificent hospitality. He sent them word of his munificence. The preceding generation, a writer of eminent merit, was sure to be munificently rewarded by the government. Toxic. Toxin. Toxicity. Toxicology. Toxicologist. I think it's toxic and undermines your ability to succeed. They tended to be organ-specific because the toxin would accumulate there. The comparative toxicity of different insecticides. The toxicology report done after his death found no trace of drugs or alcohol. I'm trained as a toxicologist, but I've spent my career doing my research and practice around the area of risk analysis. Paragon. Paragon of virtue. She was sort of this paragon of the family value community. Peruse. Perusal. So I think that when you have a chance to peruse the book, you'll see some strategies in there. After a quick perusal of the magazine, Dane decided to buy a subscription. Exonerate. Exoneration. He was exonerated from all responsibility for the accident. Peter was exonerated after he proved someone else stole the cookies. In 1989, we had the first DNA exoneration in the US. Proponent. A conservationist at heart, I'm a proponent of recycling and composting. I've been the biggest proponent of it, saying, I really hope that vitamin A or C might be the answer to all of these chronic diseases. Rigor. Rigorous. Rigorously. Rigorousness. The rigor of prison life. Becca's anatomy class was so rigorous only half the students passed. Some of them go back to the very first period in which law to be studied rigorously as a discipline. There's nobody out there who doesn't think an academically rigorous education. Retention. Retentive. Billy has trouble with retention, he never remembers the periodic table. A lot of people, when they forget things, they blame their retention. It's moisture retentive, it kind of buffers the temperature extremes we get sometimes in the spring and fall for shallow-rooted plants. Detach. Detached. Detachable. Detachment. Technicians detach a link from a chain. He is sentenced in 20 years in jail is a detached judgment. Her detached response to the crisis. It is fantastic to look at with its detachable 40-round magazine. The detachment of units from the main force. Eminent. Eminence. Eminently. He is eminent both as a sculptor and as a portrait painter. After his hard work, finally he reached eminence as a doctor. She seems eminently suitable for the job. Diverse. Diversify. Diversification. Diversity. His interests are very diverse. Some publishers are now diversifying into software. One of the biggest aspects now is basically a diversification of students. We must try to diversity the syllabus to attract more students. One of the biggest aspects now is basically a diversification of students. We must try to diversity the syllabus to attract more students. Incongruous. Incongruous. Incongruity. Incongruously. Amy's charming smile is incongruous considering how angry she is right now. The apparent incongruity of a scientist having a simple religious faith. The techniques are incongruously employed against a background of poor dietary design. Patronize. Patronizing. Patronizingly. The restaurant is patronized by politicians and journalists. The way my grandmother still pinches my cheek is so patronizing. A famous professor of law who was patronizingly trying to put me down. Unassailable. Liverpool have built up an unassailable lead at the top of the First Division. Her position is unassailable. Her argument is unassailable. Tenacious. Tenaciously. Tenacity. The eagle seized its prey in a tenacious grip. It was a movement that fought tenaciously with little or no money. A testament to the incredible tenacity of the human spirit. Exempt. Exemption. Many college students are exempt from paying taxes. After 6 years in service, he exempted from military service. It's equivalent to a yield exemption. Collaborate. Collaboration. Collaborator. We decided to collaborate to figure that out. The film was a collaboration between the director and producers. People want to work with you if they see you as a collaborator, not someone who's trying to say I have all the answers. Immaterial. The cost is immaterial. It is immaterial to me whether he stays or leaves. He felt that the mind or the soul was something immaterial and separated from the body. Animate. Animated. Animatedly. Animation. Animator. Jim's animated facial expressions are both weird and hilarious. A smile animated her face. Animated by fresh hope, he started again. Are people speaking loudly and animatedly? And they're all smiling. We could see how excited he was by the animation in his face. If you're an animator, you can go find an illustration, download it, put in the After Effects, and turn it into some kind of cartoon. Negligence. Negligent. Negligently. Negligible. The accident was due to her negligence. She was negligent in her work. She began to treat her work negligently and soon she was fired. The money I spend on gum is negligible and not worth including in the budget. Salutary. Salutation. The health spa boasted a nutritious and salutary cuisine. The accident is a salutary reminder of the dangers of climbing. The polite salutations of the courtier. Versatile. Versatility. The best thing about a sofa bed is that it is versatile, not that it's comfortable. It has the versatility of being able to treat structures outside the brain. Appropriate. Appropriately. Appropriateness. Appropriation. He was accused of appropriating club funds. Sports clothes are not appropriate for a formal wedding. $5,000 has been appropriated for a new training scheme. So would it be fair to summarize this as getting the right information out and acting on it appropriately? The other main benefit is social appropriateness. Make an appropriation of several $1,000s for payment of debts. Misanthrope. Misanthropy. Misanthropic. Mr. Jones is a misanthrope who throws rocks at people who stray into his yard. I think he was, to a very high degree, misanthropic that he hated some people more than others. Assert. Assertion. Assertive. Assertively. Assertiveness. You are too timid, you must try to assert yourself more. I'm going to make the case for why my assertion is true. Some of us aren't as assertive or aggressive as we can be. We do not trust you to behave assertively when we are addressing risk. It goes to show the increasing aggression, increasing assertiveness of Russia. Ostentation. Ostentatious. Ostentatiously. The vulgar ostentation of the newly rich. The leadership lives in a very ostentatious manner. Lincoln was not an ostentatiously religious man. Exorbitant. Exorbitance. Exorbitantly. The price of food here is exorbitant. An exorbitance that seemed to have been brought about by a midlife crisis. Having a health insurance in US are exorbitantly expensive. Caustic. Caustically. Molly's caustic comments have lost her many friendships. These are still effective cleaners and are very inexpensive as well as being less caustic and abrasive. I wanted to eat my words when I found out that she had painted the picture I criticized so caustically. Province. Provincial. Provincially. Provincialism. He found life in provinces boring. Whenever I go to London I feel like a provincial. Traditional organizations frequently wind up as provincially registered non-profit societies. He wanted to escape from the provincialism of the small university where he taught. Fervent. Fervently. Joan has a fervent hope that her SAT scores will improve by 200 points. I'm working on now for what I fervently pray will someday be a book about James Madison. Adroit. Adroitly. Adroitness. Lane is an adroit skier and snowboarder. She adroitly avoided the question. He turned his large car with some adroitness and drove away. Depict. Depiction. Her paintings depict the lives of ordinary people in the last century. The useful introduction discusses changing attitudes to TE depiction of nature. Predecessor. My predecessor worked in this job for 12 years. His predecessor was accorded an equally tumultuous welcome. I inherited a number of problems from my predecessor. Sagacious. Sagaciously. Sagacity. He was a shrewd, sagacious old man. A few years ago, a group of people of insight gathered together to survey the changing market sagaciously and began to chase their dreams. Sagacity, unlike cleverness, may increase with age. Polar. Polarity. Polarize. It's very cold in the polar regions. Love and hatred are polar feelings. There is a growing polarity between the workers and the management. The nation as a whole was thoroughly polarized into left and right-wing groups. Relevant. Relevance. Relevant documents were presented in court. What relevance does that point have to the discussion? Habitat. Habitation. Habitable. Some animals are in danger because their native habitat is being destroyed. The house was unfit for human habitation. They've done their best to make the house habitable. Nostalgia. Nostalgic. Nostalgically. Some people feel nostalgia for their school days. I get very nostalgic when I watch these old musicals on TV. They spent an hour together, talking nostalgically as they wandered slowly down the coast road. Underscore. These kinds of question also underscore the importance of defining with precision the concepts that we use in political analysis. I should have caught some more waves so they couldn't underscore me. The arrow comes in later to underscore the point, our future looks good. Curd. Curdly. Curdness. The boss was rather curt with him. He nodded curtly and walked away. His tone was characterized by curtness and dryness. Retaliate. Retaliation. Retaliatory. He slapped his sister, who retaliated by kicking him. He never said a single word in retaliation. He urged people not to resort to retaliatory violence. Voracious. Voraciously. Voracity. He has a voracious appetite for knowledge about what is happening around every corner in New York City. They voraciously drank all the edible and potable water at one time. He ate with the voracity of a starving man. Improvise. Improvisation. Sometimes I improvise and change the words because I forget them. Improvisation means take your chances while you can, where you can, it means ride your luck. Prodigious. Prodigiously. Prodigy. Some galaxies seem to release prodigious amount of energy. He was also the most prodigiously gifted child she had ever encountered. A child prodigy, he made his first professional tour as a pianist at the age of 6. Ironic. Ironical. Ironically. The film is more an ironic fantasy than a horror story. It's ironical that the weakest student in mathematics was elected class treasurer. Ironically, most people came to watch the match on the day it poured with rain. Entrenched. Entrench. Entrenchment. The enemy were strongly entrenched on the other side of the river. Our soldiers have entrenched themselves behind the battle. The troops were entrenched near the mountains. There has been a shift in opinion on the issue after a decade of entrenchment. Contempt. Contemptible. Contemptuous. Contemptuously. At school she had complete contempt for all her students. 10 years at the same job and now he hates it. Familiarity breeds contempt. It was a contemptible trick to tell lies and play on an old friend. He was openly contemptuous of his elder brother. The waiter smiled contemptuously at anyone who didn't know which wine to order. Frank. Frankly. Frankness. To be perfectly frank with you, I think your son has little chance of passing the exam. Tell me frankly, what's wrong? She spoke about her fears with complete frankness. Mitigate. Mitigating. Mitigation. Nothing could mitigate the cruelty with which she had treated him. The jury must take into account any mitigating circumstances presented by the defense, such as previous good character. All I can say, in mitigation, was that to my knowledge I was never the one to start trouble. Contrivance. Contrive. Contrived. Some things are beyond human contrivance. I decided to contrive a meeting between the two of them. The lawsuit says oil companies contrived the oil shortage in the 1970s. It mustn't he sound like a contrived compliment. Elaborate. Elaboration. Elaborately. Elaborateness. The police played an elaborate game of cat and mouse to trap him. You understand the situation, I needn't elaborate any further. The reaction of many will be to welcome the elaboration of ideas which evidence has already brought them. It was the most elaborately decorated cake, all sugar, flowers and bows. Marriage package prices run as low as $250 to more than $1,000 based on the features, location, and elaborateness of the event. Valid. Validity. Validate. Validation. Your return ticket is valid for 3 months. It takes time for the validity or fruitfulness of any academic development to become clear. The passport has to be signed before the official can validate it. The validation of our model using the same selection criteria was also mandatory. Terse. Tersely. Terseness. The president issued a terse statement denying the charges. It was tersely worded, but a significant breakthrough. Emerson always keep us up not less by his memorable terseness than by his startling habit of illustration. Pretension. Pretentious. Pretentiousness. He makes no pretensions to being an expert on the subject. I know this sounds pretentious, but I actually try to be honest. There was no hint of pretentiousness in her manner. Impecunious. Impecuniously. Impecuniousness. After buying his car, Stewart was so impecunious he couldn't afford to drive it. They are independent, impecunious, and able to tolerate all degrees of discomfort. There is likely to be tension between landlord and tenant, between large landowners and impecunious peasants. Charisma. Charismatic. Charismatically. How did a man of so little personal charisma get to be Prime Minister? Martin Luther King was a very charismatic speaker. I always like to think about Alice, who was given a tremendous charismatic gift of healing. Erudite. Erudition. People believed him because he was erudite. His enemies recognized his brilliance and erudition. Pliant. Pliancy. Pliant judge have been a problem in the past. I think the equally important is this pliancy of attention. Populism. Populist. Their ideas are simple populism: tax cuts and higher wages. Populist pressure demands higher standards in the basics. Presume. Presumption. Presumptive. Presumptuous. I don't want to presume on our friendship by asking for too many favors. May I presume to advise you? Juries should have a presumption of innocence regarding the accused. These are the considerations justifying a presumptive privilege for presidential communications. He was presumptuous before the decision had been approved. Reciprocal. Reciprocally. Reciprocate. Reciprocity. He spoke of the necessity for a reciprocal relationship that would be useful for all sides. Wavelength and frequency are, of course, related reciprocally. They wanted to reciprocate the kindness that had been shown to them. In an act of reciprocity, Jen gave me a book after I gave her a CD. Alleviate. Alleviation. The doctor gave her an injection to alleviate the pain. A sound base has been laid for the poverty alleviation work. Satire. Satirical, satiric. Satirically. Satirize. Satirist. The candidate was a frequent object of satire on late-night comedy shows. She writes satirical sketches for a magazine. His cartoon has a satiric humor. Swift also, being satirically referred to in the book, made it the subject of a caricature. Politicians are often satirized on TV and radio. He built a reputation in the 1970s as a social satirist. Intuit. Intuition. Intuitive. Intuitively. They intuit what it must be like feeling sorrow so far from home. I had a sudden intuition about the missing jewels. Are women more intuitive than men? She seemed to know intuitively how to do it. Interminable. Interminably. I had interminable problems with my last computer, it never worked well. We had to wait interminably. Distinguish. Distinguished. Distinguishable. Speech distinguishes human beings from the animals. She distinguished herself by her coolness and bravery. The coast was barely distinguishable in the mist. Erroneous. Erroneously. Blaine received erroneous information, and was the only party-goer wearing a costume. There are lots of these photos being erroneously reported as spam and abuse. Subtle. Subtlety. Subtly. I even began to exploit him in subtle ways. Her dancing has great subtlety. Not very subtly, he raised the subject of money. Recriminate. Recrimination. Recriminatory. I'm certain I should recriminate, and God knows where we should end. Accusations and recriminations passed back and forth between the divorcing couple. Later he usually makes some recriminatory remark against those that kept their seats. The end.